On today's show, everything you need to know about the WHL expansion, and we explore the seismic shift in the landscape of junior hockey across North America due to the NCAA unilateral decision back in November.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we have an episode breaking down some very recent news that is going to also have some greater impacts overall on prospect development in the coming years. And we'll also be exploring a little bit as to why this news is happening and what perhaps will be occurring in the coming months, years, and how that's going to impact prospects in their development, NHL teams in developing their prospects, and overall how the balance of talent is spread across the continent in North America between the various junior leagues and the college level in the NCAA. So a bit of a meta episode here today, both focusing on news and the overall impact that it's having on the systems, which form the direction that the game of hockey is going in at the NHL level. So an interesting show here for you in store today. In the first segment, we'll be breaking down the WHL expansion itself, talking about the Penticton Vees, as well as the potential Chilliwack team for the 2026-27 season. And in the second segment, we'll be delving a little bit back into November's NCAA unilateral decision that has allowed CHL alumni to enter the NCAA. So you've seen quite a few CHL players now actually also commit to NCAA teams, which has never been previously allowed due to the NCAA stance on professionalism. So the NCAA never allowed players who have previously been basically professional athletes paid for sport to play in their leagues, as well as players who've played in the same league as those types of professional players. And the CHL is a league where NHL teams have contracted players in that league to assign to ELCs, entry-level contracts, who are not yet playing in the NHL, but are loaned back to the OHL, or the WHL, or the QMJHL, and are allowed to play there. And that simple fact disqualified all CHL alumni from playing college hockey until now, until next season. And that is changing things massively. That has had a huge impact on multiple leagues across North America, specifically the USHL, of course, the NCAA, and the big CHL leagues. But the BCHL, AJHL, and overall Junior A hockey is suffering greatly. And finally, in the last segment, we're going to be wrapping up the show by talking about why the CHL to NCAA pathway is going to become a real pipeline for prospect development that you're going to see a lot of NHL teams as well as NHL prospects really wanting to go down for both the sake of development and the experiences themselves for the players. So that's what today's show is going to look like. But before we jump into everything, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So let's start things off here in the first segment by talking about the WHL expansion, which was just announced here on the 24th, which is also the day that I am recording this, but is going to be uploaded early on the 25th of March. And with this, the WHL announced that the Penticton Vees of the BCHL are going to be joining the WHL for next season, the 2025-26 campaign, and will be holding an expansion draft on May 6th to do so. So you're going to be seeing now one of the premier teams of the BCHL that has produced quite a lot of talent in recent years. I mean, I don't think I need to remind you. I mean, Bradley Nadeau was playing there the same year as Adar Suniev. Nadeau is one of the top prospects for the Carolina Hurricanes now, while Suniev is developing very well in the NCAA, having taken that BCHL route in order to access the NCAA after having been drafted by the Calgary Flames. But the BCHL route to the NCAA is no longer one that is enticing to prospects. We saw Cale Makar take that as well, not in the BCHL, but in the AJHL instead in Alberta with the Brooks Bandits, who this season have also transferred over to the BCHL. It gets a little confusing if you're not already familiar with the dynamics of these leagues and the teams within them. But all in all, these AJHL, BCHL, overall junior A leagues in Canada suffering greatly in terms of losing talent, and the top talent that they were able to retain in terms of draft eligibles, especially that were deciding to wait in order to access the NCAA, are losing all of that. And Penticton, having been one of the biggest beneficiaries of this system in recent years, is quickly making a jump to the WHL here in this move. And you're seeing the WHL growing by 2 teams in the next 2 seasons. And this might be a trend throughout the CHL, throughout the Canadian Hockey League, in terms of growth potential. The Ontario Hockey League potentially growing as well, something that we'll also be discussing in the next segment with the Youngstown Phantoms and the Muskegon Lumberjacks making attempts at least to join the OHL for next season. But overall, we're seeing this real boost in the CHL in terms of talent as a result of their alumni being allowed into college hockey. And this has been a really, really big change in terms of how different leagues operate with each other. And there's still a lot of pieces to fall into place. There's a lot remains up in the air. And in the coming months, in the coming year or two, we're going to get a much clearer picture of what crystallizes here for how these leagues are going to interact and how specifically leagues are going to be able to retain talent, because the USHL is another one that's going to be suffering a little bit. But to bring things back here to the WHL expansion itself, very exciting times for the cities of Penticton and Chilliwack to gain WHL franchises. I mean, these are 2 British Columbia cities that have been eyeing that WHL spotlight for quite some time. So it's really nice for those cities to get these teams in place. But for Chilliwack especially, it's going to be interesting to see how this team's going to be built up. The ownership group hasn't even been formed yet, so everything remains up in the air for that franchise, including team name, anything along those lines. But they're going to be renovating an existing arena in the city with $3 million or so in order to get it up to WHL standards. So very exciting there for Chilliwack. And with this increase in teams, the WHL is only going to get even more competitive than it's been in recent seasons. Even more talent is going to be entering the ranks. It's going to be very exciting here. And that amount of talent entering the ranks, including into these franchises. I mean, Penticton and Chilliwack, neither team has a single player on their roster as of yet. Penticton's going to go out and make a list of 15 players under their purview that they go scout. But beyond that, it's going to be on that expansion draft on May 7th that they're going to really form their teams. So that's going to be a very exciting day for the city of Penticton. But also, interestingly enough, a very exciting day for Mark Scheifele, who is a part owner in the Penticton Vees. So an interesting little nugget found in that WHL press release that I was unaware of previously. These teams are potentially going to be filled with quite a bit of skill within 3 or 4 years. Likely not out of the gate, but within a couple years' time, there's going to be a lot of talent here because there's going to be a lot of talent league-wide. And we're going to be exploring a lot more of that in the next segment as to why the CHL is going to get this big influx in talent, and more broadly asking why these shifts are happening, digging into that NCAA unilateral decision and the overall impacts in North American men's junior hockey. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Instead of hiring full time, Upwork helps find affordable, top tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. There's nothing like watching basketball live. The energy of the crowd, the sound of sneakers on the hardwood, and maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever before. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out all the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. I just checked the Game Time app, and there are amazing deals on some huge matchups coming up. Game Time Picks even highlights super deals, giving you the best bang for your buck. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, let's keep this episode rolling in the second segment by delving a little bit into the why of these big changes with the WHL expansion, as well as the further impact of the NCAA decision back in November. So, the NCAA decision has really altered the balance of power, and everything remains in flux, as we were saying there in the first segment. And the Penticton Vees are not the only team to have made brash, big time decisions within a couple months of this decision occurring in the NCAA in terms of switching leagues. In the USHL, you've already seen the Muskegon Lumberjacks and the Youngstown Phantoms really try hard to get out of the USHL in order to join the OHL. The OHL would be rather willing to accept these two teams in terms of the financial opportunities that those markets would open up for the league. And the owners of those teams would really like to access OHL type of attendance numbers as well. But the USHL and USA Hockey as a whole is able to block them as of right now. However, there's a big lawyer battle occurring at the moment. The Phantoms are owned by a very, very rich person who has access to a very, very good lawyer, and they've been trying to basically smuggle their way out of that league in recent months. So interesting storyline to follow here moving forward. But overall, you are seeing teams trying to move with the tides here in terms of adjusting to these power shifts. And the CHL is gaining power in these dynamics in terms of their alumni being allowed to go to the NCAA means that a lot of high-end players who want to go the college route are now very much incentivized as 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds to play in the CHL. And that is at the core of all of these changes. Specifically, the USHL, as we mentioned, is going to struggle. Not just are you going to see teams leaving potentially the league or trying to leave the league, at least there's going to be that struggle that's already ongoing, but players as well are now going to be very much distracted potentially by the allure of the CHL. The USHL has a lot less attendance than the CHL does. CHL has brighter lights. It has more money in terms of what's invested in prospects development, and players can also get stipends and access to money, as well as entry-level contracts potentially once they get drafted, or not if they want to end up going the NCAA route. If they do sign ELCs, they will still be disqualified from going to the NCAA. However, that's going to be now an interesting dynamic where you're going to see teams and prospects having different motives, perhaps, in terms of whether a prospect goes to the NCAA or not, in terms of when they sign that entry level deal. It's going to be interesting to see how that's going to affect things as well. But all that's to say that elite young hockey players are now going to be faced with decisions that previous generations never had been before, in terms of not really needing to choose between different development paths between the CHL and the NCAA and college hockey, but being able to double dip and go into both pots of the best development paths really out there in the North America. The NCAA is going to see an even bigger influx of talent from CHL alumni. The CHL is going to see an even more talent from players that want to go the college route. Both of those are institutions are going to benefit hugely at the detriment of the AJHL, BCHL, the Junior A leagues, as well as potentially the USHL. But the NHL might still have a role to play in terms of keeping the USHL afloat in their relationships with USA Hockey as well. So much remains up in the air at this moment. But in the final segment, we'll wrap up the show by digging a bit deeper into why that CHL to NCAA pathway is just so attractive to both prospects and NHL teams alike. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment. I just find it fascinating as a hockey fan in general and a scout to watch how these balances are shifting in terms of the power between different leagues, where the talent's going to find itself, and how that's going to impact not only prospects' developments and how they develop in their games, and also seeing a little bit of styles of play combining a bit more of a distinct Canadian CHL style and a distinct American USHL to NCAA hockey style becoming a lot more blurred in coming seasons than it's been here in the past. I find that very interesting watching the game, but NHL teams and prospects could really be licking their lips at the possibilities for development with this new system in place. And that CHL to NCAA pipeline is going to see so much talent pass through it in the next decade and well beyond. It's really, I think, going to become the premier way of developing high-end talent that is not yet ready to make that jump to the NHL. It also alleviates a lot of the pressure that's been building up in recent seasons of very mature players who've dominated junior leagues, but who have not yet been eligible to play in the AHL, while also not being refined enough for playing in the NHL, kind of being left in purgatory. And we saw Shane Wright get an exception in order to make that jump to the AHL to play in Coachella Valley because there was just nothing left for him to prove or learn or do in the OHL that he hadn't already done in Kingston. Prospects are getting physically mature at younger and younger ages with just how good physical training is becoming for these young players. And this new pathway, in terms of getting players who can dominate the CHL to be able to make a jump in quality of competition before they sign their entry level deals and before they're eligible to play in the AHL and aren't quite at the NHL level just yet. It gives them a pathway that makes sense for their development, where they're not just left in a league where they shouldn't be in anymore. Like this season, Andrew Crystal has no business being in the WHL anymore. Spokane Chiefs fans, I'm sure, are very, very grateful that he is, but he has nothing left to prove. This season, sure, he's breaking records. He's doing obscenely amazing things there in the WHL with his playmaking, his manipulation, his intelligence, but it's all so far above the level that he's playing against that he's not being challenged in ways that is forcing him to explore different areas in his game and really grow in uncomfortable ways. It's not been a season of discomfort for Andrew Crystal. And in the NCAA, it may have been in terms of the physical contact and the different requirements in terms of getting inside and accessing dangerous areas on the ice. I think that would have also really furthered a player like Andrew Crystal in his development this season. But moving forward, players in that mold are going to likely take that route to college hockey. And I think that's very exciting from a prospect's perspective in terms of what is possible down the road with your development of those sequential steps rather than being stuck at a certain level for more years than you really should be. And another reason that NHL teams are licking their lips at these possibilities now with this new system is that with that pipeline from the CHL to the NCAA, NHL teams could retain the rights on players they draft, especially out of the CHL, for much, much longer. The NCAA could be a full 4-year ride. The CHL could be a full 2 years. I'm not 100% sure on the details here, but it's possible that then players drafted out of the CHL that take that NCAA route are going to be under their team's umbrella for 6 seasons. Maybe it's just going to be 5 or so, but either way, it's going to be a big upgrade on the just 2 or 3 it often is for CHL drafted talents nowadays. And for overage talents, that window is even smaller. So this gives NHL teams a bigger opportunity to watch, evaluate their prospects before having to make the decisions on whether or not to dedicate a contract slot to that player. For another perspective, I think that this is quite exciting for the families of young players, especially in Canada, who see their kids go through the OHL or the CHL leagues without necessarily going to college before graduating to the NHL. And instead, for both the families and also these young men, these young players, going through their college experience, not just to have the college experience in terms of moving away from home, that kind of independence, and having to juggle the studies with the playing, which requires the building of life skills in these young men. And considering that Canadian universities in hockey specifically aren't really options for NHL level development in terms of draft eligible or D+1 players, especially now with these shifting balances with the NCAA, there's even less incentive to go the U Sports route in Canada now for high end prospects. Having the option now to both have that CHL experience, but also getting an education before making the leap to the NHL, I think is very exciting for young Canadian hockey players and their families. On the flip side, of course, these impacts are never just felt by one side. NCAA men's hockey is going to look very, very different in 10 years' time to today. You're going to see a lot more imported talent from Canada, from Europe, from abroad, and a lot less local heroes, perhaps, for the schools, especially in terms of D1 hockey. Further on that, players who have already committed to playing in the NCAA in terms of D1 hockey, but are perhaps a rung down in terms of not being in the scopes of NHL teams, those players might be really bumped down the lineup and potentially completely bumped out of teams in college hockey in favor of those imported Canadian and CHL graduate talents in terms of bring up the quality of league. So you're going to see CHL and NCAA hockey's quality just increase perpetually, I think, in coming seasons. However, also at the detriment of some of those local underdog storylines and just overall those small town, small player, non professional dreams that have often been made at the college level. That's going to change. You're going to see a lot more big names, players that graduate to the NHL, and that's going to just change the look of things here with hockey. So, overall, I think that the WHL expansion was a very nice excuse to talk about the overall systems and the big changes happening here at the moment across the hockey landscape, but also for the WHL itself. Very interesting for it to be growing, and for the cities of Penticton and Chilliwack specifically to be gaining teams. A lot to be enjoyed here for more hockey all around in British Columbia. But that wraps things up here for the episode today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought about this episode and overall what your thoughts are on these big seismic shifts. If you're a WHL fan or a resident of Penticton or Chilliwack, what does that news make you feel? Are you excited about your team? And what are your expectations for the quality of hockey you're going to get? And of course, as always, I'd just be interested in hearing your opinions down below on anything that caught your eye in today's show. But thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I hope to catch you tuning in again very, very soon.